Hey everybody, this is Van Hargis with Van Hargis Horsemanship. I guess we're going to get a two for today. As I said last week, oftentimes during this time of year, what I call or what we commonly known as the dog days of summer, never really knew what that meant until I was down here in South Texas. And I'm telling you, down here, dog days of summer means, gosh dang, it's too hard for your dog to get out of the pond. It's pretty darn hot. It's been humid here lately, and just kind of made things a little tougher. So what we do, oftentimes, we'll break our day up. We'll get busy in the morning, get as much stuff done as we can. Then we'll take a break during the heat of the day, and then we'll come back in toward the evening. We'll ride a couple of more. Well, there's three of us, so we'll ride a few more horses between the three of us. But I talked earlier today about suppleness and the importance of suppleness, what it kind of means, and I say kind of because there's no way that I can cover that in an 8-minute drive over to the ranch, and that's stretching it because it really doesn't take me that long to drive over there. But today we're gonna continue moving forward in our foundation. We're gonna talk now a little bit about contact. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make, and before I go to this point, I'm gonna really commend our English riders. I really wish that sometimes us Western folks would take riding lessons from an English instructor riding an English tack first. And if you can't do that, then by golly, just go ride bareback a lot and have somebody watch you, videotape yourself, have somebody videotape you. Make sure that you're riding and riding correct, even though you're not necessarily in your saddle and in your stirrups. It's real important that we learn to ride with contact. That's for you in that point of it. Now, the other part of the contact, we're going to talk a little bit later about the horse being in contact with the bridle. And because I touch base on English and Western here, we all know that there's a slight difference, slight being the key word there. It's not nearly as grand as what people would like to believe that it is, but there's a slight difference between our English horses being in contact and on the bridle, and our Western horses being in contact and on the bridle. We tend to be a little bit lighter in the Western world. We tend to have our horses on the bridle but on a loose rein. Sounds like a contradiction, but it's not. You see, I train my horses, for example, to respond to the weight of the rein, but yet I've still got to push them into the bridle for me to be able to guide them and send them where I need them to go. But we do so on a loose rein, which means I want that horse to be a little bit more in tune with me, so that the slightest of movement of that loose rein, the horse is responding to the weight of the rein. In other words, that's the contact that he's responding to. Now, we're going to go into that a lot more later, and I want you guys to bring that up to me and remind me later. But for now, we're going to talk about contact with our body. The reason I encourage you to ride bareback or ride in an English tack from time to time is because that kind of forces you to ride in contact with your horses. Your legs should be in contact with your horses as you're riding. Too many times, number one, I see our Western tack designed incorrectly. We tend to want to sit in a Western saddle too much on our butt with our legs in front like we're sitting in a recliner. I couldn't disagree with that more. I think we need to be sitting up properly. I think we should be sitting up to where our head should be over our shoulders should be over our hips, and our hips should be over our feet. In other words, we should be somewhat in a fairly straight line there as a rule of thumb. And I've got to say that because as soon as I don't, I'm going to have some sort of cutting enthusiast get pissed off at me because of the way what they sit in what we refer to as the cutter's slump. I understand why we need to do that. I understand why our reiners might need to ride a little bit different length of stirrup and sit properly, or sit a little differently to be properly. I understand that our ropers might sit with our stirrups a little bit longer, and we might, so that whenever we're standing up in our stirrups, so to speak, we're not standing up above the saddle. So I understand that in our Western discipline, we have disciplines within the discipline to where we're making those other adjustments. But I don't care who you are, what you're doing, you got to be riding in contact. I can't think of a single scenario to where it's okay for us to be riding with our legs off our horses. In fact, the only time I think that's a good idea is if you're asking your horses to stop, you're in perfect contact, and you take a little bit of that contact off and you relax in the saddle. In other words, what we talked about earlier. We're changing that rhythm, or we're stopping that rhythm, and we're inviting our horses to come down to our rhythm. And if we're sitting in the saddle doing nothing, we expect our horses to come back to us and do nothing. But what I'm talking about here is being in contact with your horses. You want to be in the proper position with your posture, proper relative to the discipline in which you're riding, cutting, reining, working, cow horse, barrels, roping, whatever that discipline may be. We want to ride correctly within that. The other part of that, though, is in contact with your horses. Be in contact. I even think that's important for our younger colts. Be in contact with them. Let them know where you are. If you understand the basic philosophy of teaching a horse to travel to the path of least resistance, that contact is so important. I'm going to quit with this. I'm going to give you guys this little seed of thought here. I'm going to plant a seed and let you guys contemplate and think about it. But it's just this. If you can get a horse to move away from pressure, why can't you simply get a horse to move to where there is no pressure? I'm going to repeat that. If you can get a horse to move away from pressure, why can't you just simply get a horse to move to where there is no pressure? Think about your legs riding in the saddle. Think about that scenario. If both legs are riding equally in balance on your horse and in contact, and if you want your horse to glide or move slightly to your right, you don't necessarily have to kick him with your left leg. Maybe you just open the door with your right leg. Just take that right leg off and give him a direction to go. Think about that. If you can get a horse to move away from pressure, why can't you simply get a horse to move to where there is no pressure? You can't do that if you're not riding with proper contact. The same exact thing goes with our bridle and our bridle reins. Think about that. It's more important than you think it is. And if you're discounting it, you got to spend some time with me to learn a little bit more about how to get along with your horses a little bit better, a little bit easier, a little bit softer. And you do that by being in contact. Appreciate you guys joining me on the Ranch Road again today. Episode number 2 for today, I guess you could say. And thank you for joining me. This is Van Hargis with Van Hargis Horsemanship.